When Ryan's when it's time to begin, it's on the Rewind to Raw with John Pollock and Wai Ting. Me 18, that makes sense of these things we see in the ring every week on TV. It's Rewind to Raw for Monday night, download a Tuesday morning from the Post Wrestling site. It's Rewind to Raw for Monday night on USA Now on the John and Wai Take the Mic.
It is Rewind to Raw. I am John Pollock and he is Wai Ting. Hello, Wai.
Hey, John, how you doing? How you feeling?
I'm exhausted. I absolutely hit a wall today and needed I needed my nap before Raw because I wasn't going to make it. It's been a long couple of days that have caught up with me. How are you doing?
Yeah, about the same. I think it's because mentally, probably was expecting a bit of a stop point maybe after last night, and it really hasn't been. So we're here to talk.
I think next year maybe we should just take it easy and go to Philadelphia and cover WrestleMania. Let's take it easy next year.
Oh man, no, travel would be that much worse, honestly. So I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about whether or not we might be going. I'm sorry, just got a little. Anyway,
well, I can tell you that next year, at least on the Monday where we would be traveling home, we wouldn't be contending with a WWE sale. So that we can assure for next year as well. Let's jump into things because Brandon Thurston and I did a lengthy show earlier today going through a lot of the major key points of today's big story of the sale going through that Endeavor has acquired WWE and is spinning it off into its own company, separate company from Endeavor that will be housing the WWE and the UFC. It does not have a name yet, although Vince McMahon is putting his head down and will be coming up with something. They are going to be using the on the stock ticker. It will be going by the letters TKO.
Oh yeah.
How do you like that, Wai?
Oh, I love it. Calls back to my favorite Canadian MMA promotion.
That's right. That's right.
In the world.
I don't know if Stefan Patry had any thoughts on this choice of lettering, but that is going to be the new company, and Endeavor will have the controlling shares of 51%, while WWE shareholders will maintain 49%, with Endeavor holding 6 seats on their board of governors or board of directors, with WWE having 5 seats as well. We went over the comments, Vince McMahon and Ari Emanuel speaking publicly on CNBC, but sort of your big picture thoughts and reaction, Wai, since we spoke with you on Sunday night.
I think the biggest thing for me is just maybe more of the acceptance that Vince McMahon is back, and he's back in a big way, even arguably maybe in some ways in terms of his mainstream sort of power now, maybe bigger than it's ever been. The fact that he appeared on CNBC this morning showing his face tells you that he doesn't feel like there's anything to hide anymore. He can be as public as he wants and, say that he's lived up to his mistakes or accepted his mistakes or whatever he said, and then he's moved on, and it just seems like it's business as usual.
And he has gotten through the biggest challenge that was going to be this sale, and the idea of, would a buyer want to be in business with a Vince McMahon? Ari Emanuel clearly wanted Vince to be part of this and would not let him walk away. So you are through that hurdle. Of course, Brandon brought it up, and it's worth mentioning that when we're seeing the filings back at the beginning of the year, and Vince, forcing himself back into the company, and the WWE board of directors stating in their letter that, they had reason to believe that there are things that are not public yet that would certainly put off some warning signs. I think the last thing you would want would be any potential issues that come with this, as the sale is still not finalized. It still has to be approved at the requisite levels of government, but they're expecting it to close by the end of this year. But nonetheless, Vince McMahon, he is very much back in the thick of things, and he was Fightful reporting that he was at Raw tonight, and he was at least in Gorilla for the opening segment, if not longer. But they had only noted the beginning of the show that he was there. But, we got his explanation when asked about the creative involvement that he is sort of going to be your big picture guy that is going to be overseeing things, but he will not be, quote, in the weeds, which for those with a good memory, it instantly brought you back to the exact phrasing he used when Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff were hired as executive directors, that Vince would have a overarching view of the creative, but would not be in the weeds. And we know how in the weeds turned out to be back in 2019. And even looking at a big picture direction like that's going to have an enormous influence if the big direction is ultimately Vince's call, which that's the setup that it is going to be. Time will tell. But you could certainly watch this show and you're watching it and suddenly is Bad Bunny at a hospital? No, he's at a local medical facility. And you're just, all these little things that you're just going to pay closer attention to now. But I don't think anyone is looking at this as though it's some guarded state secret that Vince McMahon is going to have a hand in directions, and maybe he will at times get into the minutia. I mean, I don't think anyone should be surprised by that. Exactly, right into the weeds and yanking out stuff. And we'll get to it later as well with like Fightful's report, like several changes to the show coming as well from the afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just maybe the course of, activity that's taken place from January until now, this feels like it's a pretty logical progression. But just to kind of think back to where we were at the end of, January, at the start of this year, thinking that he was out of this business, or at the very least, out as, the day-to-day, to now, I think you just have to look at it as just like a real power play that he managed to pull off, to get himself back in through all these various steps and look at it today, face on TV and in celebration. So
listen, I've said this before, like you can have whatever opinion you have of Vince McMahon. He navigated this masterfully from the understanding the power he held as the controlling shareholder to force his way back into the company. Now, one of the biggest obstacles he would have had was to force himself in and the stock tanks. And he had the protective cover of coming and knowing that what is going to overcome any backlash towards me, it's the promise of the gold at the other side of the rainbow, that being a sale. And when he came in, the stock did not go down. It went up because of this clear directive, this clear path that I'm here to navigate a sale. And and Wall Street welcomed him back. And that was the only penance he had to worry about. And from there, he navigated himself back into the company. And now it becomes a very interesting question that, at least publicly, the stance was he is back here to facilitate the sale of a company. Now that those strategic alternatives have been revealed, now what does his job look like? What is the task when there is not a company to be sold? You are, in theory, the number two in this brand new company. There will be no shortage of things that are needed, but what does your day-to-day look like?
I mean, judging by this interview, Ari Emanuel personally asked him to stay. And that probably, is all the justification he needs. Hey, I was going to leave. This was all I was going to do. But my boss now wants me to be here because he thinks that I'm the only person, I'm the best person for the job, whatever they have to say to justify it, and that's all he needs. And he's back.
The big things to look at when the company goes public is obviously what the appetite is for this public offering and what kind of value is assigned to this new company that is going to have to leverage this debt that is being assigned from it from day one from Endeavor. The other questions are the health of live sports rights. Ari Emanuel, Nick Khan, they are very bullish on UFC rights, on WWE rights, and they have to be. That is the lifeblood. When you look at the breakdown that they put out of UFC revenues and WWE revenues, you're looking at about 75, 73% respectively for these companies that are taking in their last year's revenues from media rights. And you have some major deals that are coming their way in the next couple of years in the imminent future are the Raw and SmackDown rights that the right of first refusals were going to be accepted this week from the incumbents. And then you have the UFC rights that are not all that far down the road in 2025 when they are up with ESPN. And one of the more interesting articles that came out today was an interview with Nick Khan on Axios that went into several topics, and it included the idea that, yes, the television deals will be separate, but the idea of a combined streaming deal with the UFC and WWE is something that could be on the table. And when you're looking at it, here are industries that can become very attractive to an endeavor. Here are these companies, they are live events and is something that they want to exploit, that are rich in intellectual property that they own completely. They do not have unions or associations, and therefore the talent costs can be kept at a ceiling. We know what it is for UFC. We don't know what the percentage is in WWE, but we know it's not an astronomical percentage. So you have that ability to control your costs, and at the same time, this is 52 a week year programming with an audience that will also buy not just live tickets, they will buy your big shows. Pro wrestling, or at least WWE, it would certainly be an experiment to try and go back to any of that. But for your biggest shows, like, this is an audience that for many of them, they grew up with the idea that the big show, we pay for that. And I always say that it's not something that your average sports fan was conditioned to, that the big game, the finals, you're getting that on television. You're not conditioned to pay $30 for the Super Bowl. You are conditioned to pay a lot of money for the big UFC card. And if you had to pay for WrestleMania, I think when push came to shove, you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think once they lay everything out, it makes perfect sense why the people who found so much success monetizing the UFC to, its greatest levels that it's ever seen will feel the same confidence in being able to grow the WWE in much the same way. And by combining the two of them and somehow, maybe amplifying the potential of the both of those, vehicles, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. So I think when it goes public, I have to imagine it's a pretty attractive looking, combined company.
It becomes interesting of how an ESPN figures into this. Like, ESPN has been a huge reason. It's UFC has done a lot for ESPN, but ESPN has done a lot for UFC. And we do see for the big events, such as like this past weekend, like they sent a crew out there with Daniel Cormier and company, and ESPN was putting a big spotlight on WWE. And you get WWE ingrained in that kind of ESPN coverage. That's a big win for WWE. And again, that's just one of many suitors, but you're looking at these existing relationships, and I just think you do have a lot of parallels between these two companies when it comes to overseas events, looking for big events that you can have site fees for, that both companies are exploring and are going to continue to. The idea that we sort of saw by accident last July, when you had International Fight Week and Money in the Bank both in Las Vegas that weekend, and you ended up somewhat piggybacking off of one another. Maybe you want to avoid those weekends, but maybe there is a time in the year when it makes sense that we could do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday combo of some sort.
Merchandising, John, t-shirt stores, action figures, like if you're making UFC figures, you can draw a deal to, make a WWE doll. If you're printing WWE shirts, well, you can use the same factory to print a UFC shirt, everything, like I mean, I'm a huge Lego fan. Of course, I follow like that company pretty closely. I look at this as almost like their ability to brand, Technic to an older, more mature audience, and the regular Lego to, little kids like me, and then Duplo for babies. You have something for every single section of the market, but it's all found in the same store.
Also, it's the notion that whenever you see big companies like this come together, it is, today it's all, popping champagne bottles and congratulations, and everyone's putting on a happy face. But there will come a day when, there is the inverse of all that celebratory mood when these companies come together, and we all lived through it and covered with the UFC and what went through just, I don't want to say a gutting of that company, but there were key people that were gone. Like their Canadian office was totally disrupted. There were people there that had been there, forever. and we're let go. And that's what happens when, okay, we have this talent relations department and this talent relations department. Well, we don't need two. And when you're taking on such a significant purchase here, like this is all about growing revenue and slimming down costs. And that will be an ongoing struggle. And there will be, unfortunately, like employee casualties with a purchase like this.
I mean, synergy is one of the big words that they've been touting with this deal. And what does synergy mean? The ability to combine the forces. And when you're combining forces, it means a lot of people are with the similar job as, you know, the other person are going to be out of work. That's just economical sense. That's going to be unfortunate and probably within these slides, not something you'll see completely touted, but that is the exact attraction of combining these teams. So it's going to be sad, yeah, for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Nick Khan was asked about potential layoffs, and he said they were unsure and that an integration team is going to be put into place between both companies in short order, and we'll have a lot more in the next week or two. Then he was also asked about the deal that WWE has with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And this is a 10-year relationship that began in 2018. So still several years left on this deal that Endeavor is inheriting with this, and what represents a large amount of revenue per year.
Right. And again, the history between Ari Emanuel and Endeavor with the Saudis is a little bit complex.
Yes. In the fallout of the Jamal Khashoggi murder in October of 2018, there was investment from the government of Saudi Arabia in Endeavor that Ari Emanuel essentially stopped after the Khashoggi murder, and it really went out and put his feelings towards that in a way that this was sizable revenue that was going to be put into Endeavor. And it has been profiled in the years since that he was very concerned about just personal safety and such. But we are also years removed from that. And it sounds very callous, but with time, when there's large amounts of money to be made, people will contort and learn ways to work with problematic areas when there is a financial benefit. Like that's just the reality. And once you're removed, like it's unfortunate, but like Jamal Khashoggi, it's not as sensitive an issue as it was in 2018, 2019. You're several years removed. And when you're looking at the WWE taking in the neighborhood of $100 million a year, again, every $1 million is appreciated when you're going through a purchase like this. And to say no to that, it's very easy for an Ari Emanuel to just say, listen, I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders to not turn that money down, and I have to put my moral compass to the side. That is his job.
I completely agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, it might have been a moral decision at the time, but it was also, I'm sure, very much a PR decision. And the stakes in terms of PR for working with Saudi Arabia are probably not as going to be covered as much now. So to add beyond that, if they do continue to, to keep this deal going, do they go one step further? And can the UFC start doing shows in Saudi Arabia? Because what's the hold up there then?
You would have no doubt that Saudi Arabia would love to have UFC fights in the country. Just the fact of the success that they have had with boxing. And quite frankly, a big UFC fight would be bigger than a big WWE show in Saudi Arabia. But Nick Khan stated that our relationship with the kingdom is a terrific partnership for which we're appreciative of, and nothing in terms of anyone else's prior experience will affect that. We think that we've delivered the product in the way that the kingdom wanted it delivered. We have a multiple-year agreement with them in place. We're excited to do a show. We'll be back there May 27th for a big premium live event. So getting in a plug there as well on a sensitive issue. Dana White gave a quote that this company has been on fire for the last 7 years, and now that we will be adding WWE to the portfolio, I am excited to take this to another level. Vince is a savage in the wrestling space. Ari is a beast at what he does. And then add what we at UFC bring to the table, and there is no limit to what this company can accomplish in the next 5 years. The beast
savage and a
savage.
Beast. What are we, this thing looks like a Dungeons and Dragons here. Sure, whatever. Yeah, I mean,
I'd love to sit in on this meeting. The first the get to know you dinner.
Can you imagine the small talk among this group? Oh man, I don't know. So if we're looking at this chain of command, it's Vince up top here of this new company that's yet to be named, and then underneath will be Dana White and Nick Khan, who are sort of the two at least entitled presidents of their respective brands. Although it sounded like from the CNBC interview that, I mean, Dana, like Ari specifically said, Vince will have WWE and Dana will have UFC. Do you anticipate Vince having much involvement with the UFC side of things at all?
I don't. I can't say that there will be some, naturally you want crossover and strategic decisions to have that kind of synergy. So that would exist. But the idea of
he's not
this
booking
idea,
fights.
Exactly. Like as Ari said, like they understand, like we are here to essentially be the engine of these companies. And that is how we have worked with it. We are not getting into the boardroom and booking fights. Like they run the fight business. We're running the business end. And I think that's what's going to exist. That is not Vince McMahon's world. Will he be leaned on? Will he have input? I mean, it would be natural that there would be more of that, but I don't foresee a situation where it would be like Vince dictating UFC business.
Except unless like with TV deals and maybe things like that, even streaming deals. I imagine Vince would have quite the voice when it comes to things.
Well,
like
again, all of this, you bring up that those are a lot of powerful figures on that spreadsheet. And when you are looking at just these domestic rights deals for WWE, is Nick Khan spearheading this? Like he has been the one doing all the legwork in the years up to this, but is Ari Emanuel now taking more of a leadership position in seeking out those television deals? Like on paper, like this looks like your NHL team where you just went out and got all the highest priced free agents. And anyone who has seen big time, like budget sports teams, you can get all the key players together, but is there going to be that cohesiveness among people that are very much leaders in their positions? And now there might be you're going to have to defer some of that power as well. Like you can look at a Nick Khan and an Ari Emanuel, and that's a dream team to be going out and selling your media rights. But who is the one that is the leader, that the head of Fox's programming is?
Will they get along? Can they get along?
Can they coexist? The story of Nuco. Maybe they should just go with Nuco. Just stay with it.
Nuco, that doesn't really. Maybe I mean Alpha's taken. He's had Titan in the past. You know what
Alpha
kind of...
Well, you don't think he'd go with Omega Entertainment, would you?
In the wrestling space, maybe. Okay. Maybe not.
Yeah, well, to be determined. A lot of questions. I should have mentioned this off the top, but Tuesday, Brandon and I will be back again, and we're going to be joined by CNBC media reporter, the man who broke this story, Alex Sherman, will be on with us live at noon Eastern on the Post Wrestling YouTube channel. So if you want to hear that interview, we will be live at noon Eastern, and then it will be available after the fact, both on the YouTube channels for WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling and our respective audio feeds. So looking forward to talking to Alex Sherman, who has been covering this story for a long time and was the one to report that the deal was imminent on Sunday, and get everyone bracing for the big sale to be announced early Monday morning. Nothing like a 6:57 a.m. email alert that the company has been sold.
I actually didn't sleep from the night prior, so I was like, it was kind of at the end of my day. But yeah, pretty exciting morning, I would say.
We'll be doing a lot more follow-up on this, but wanted to get everyone up to speed. Again, you can also catch Brandon and I discussing for about an hour and taking a lot of great listener questions as well. We got some very, very good super chats from people. WWE also put out a press release about the business of WrestleMania. So we will kind of parse through the language here, but they stated that WrestleMania became the most social WrestleMania of all time. It also had, so try and do this math, okay? Night 2 of WrestleMania 39 surpassed the existing global viewership record by 33%. Just one day after Night 1 of WrestleMania 39 surpassed the existing global viewership record by 28%. I feel like I'm doing like grade 10 math again.
It just sounds like gibberish to me. This just sounds like another language. Can you say it?
A lot of people watch this in comparison to the last time a lot of people watched a WWE show. Right. WrestleMania 39 generated a gate of more than $21.6 million, breaking the previous record by 27%. So again, it's 2 nights, and the previous record was 1 night. So you have to put that into proper context as well. I don't know if they consider the previous record another 2 nights. The singular night record was the first WrestleMania at AT&T Stadium in 2016 that did a gate of $17.3 million. So again, remember 17.3 for one night, and they did 21.6 this past weekend for 2 nights. It's an incredible gate figure for all of them, but in particular, that 2016 one, to me, it's more impressive after the fact. And they also broke their all-time sponsorship and merchandise records, sponsorship revenue eclipsing $20 million, more than doubling their previous record. Did you notice any sponsorships on the shows?
Maybe a few logos, here and there that I'd never seen before. Something about taxes, I think.
I don't know where these $20 million went. And merchandise sales were up 20% versus the record set in 2022. A huge, huge weekend. And I would say like the only dissatisfaction you sensed was people who left the main event, if that's what you kind of had your sights set on, like the big feel-good moment at the end of WrestleMania. But I would say overall, I thought night one was like an all-time great WrestleMania show. And I still would pair, like if you group the 2 nights together, among the best WrestleManias of all time when you're looking at the number of quality matches that you got between the 2 nights. But night one on its own is right up there with the top ones.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I was tremendously entertained by the 2 nights. I mean, I heard a lot of complaints, not just about the main event, but maybe about some of the pacing in between. I guess I've just come to accept it. It's the type of pacing. I actually thought night one was actually paced really well, but the commercials that they have to air on the Peacock free stream are something I've just kind of gotten used to. And as well as like, I could have done maybe without some of those, the Miz segments, but I guess the Snoop Dogg one actually generated a good, created something pretty interesting by the end, didn't it?
Yeah. As 2 guys that ended up going 2.5 hours on Sunday night, I'm not going to knock anyone's pacing. I think maybe we could take a cue as well on pacing.
Yeah, maybe.
Moving on, some unfortunate news.
Approached 30 minutes.
I know. Yeah, well, it was a slow news day. Frank Miller, who was better known as Bushwhacker Butch, member of the Sheepherders, the Kiwis, many different names, passing away on Sunday at the age of 78. He had flown from Auckland, New Zealand to LA for WrestleMania weekend, and TMZ had just reported that it was some kind of issue with his medication, and it was some short illness that he sustained and passing away at 78. So, Robert Miller, he was his real name, and he started his career all the way back in 1964 and was somebody that, I mean, by the time he got to the WWF, he was 44 years old by that time. So wow. him and Luke Williams, which was the gimmick name of Bushwhacker Luke, like they teamed together and they went everywhere, like from New Zealand, they went to Hawaii, they went to Stampede as the Kiwis, they went to Portland, Mid-Atlantic. Puerto Rico was a mainstay for them. Like they would always be going to World Wrestling Council for Carlos Colon's group. And then at one point, Butch ended up going back home to Australia. And that's when Luke was teaming up with Jonathan Boyd before he was in a car accident when they were working for Joe Blanchard in San Antonio. And that's when Miller came back, reunited with Luke, and then they ended up continuing to work with one another and just continuing to go in the territories. They won the tag titles several times in Mid-South, including they were the last reigning tag champions before they were bought out by Jim Crockett Promotions. And then they went to Jim Crockett in 87 and stayed there for most of 88 before they bolted for the WWF. And that's where they had their run that I would think a lot of people were exposed to them as the Sheepherders, which was interesting because these guys were synonymous with these bloodbaths that they would have, of course, in Puerto Rico, but as the Sheepherders all over the U.S. And then they come into the into the WWF as this children's act that would come out and lick fans' faces in a very pre-COVID era of interaction with wrestlers. And we're just like a comedy team. I mean, not, again, these guys were at this point 44 and 42 respectively when they got to the company. And it was like, not like great wrestling at a time when WWF was not selling great wrestling. And their act, I'm sure it depended on your level of fandom of how much, but a very popular, very memorable mid-card tag team, but a strong departure if you had the prior exposure to them as the sheep herders, who were like this really violent and very un-Bushwhacker-ish team. So they were on and off with WWF throughout the up until the mid 90s, and then hit the independents. They did a not so well remembered match at the Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view against the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. They came back for the gimmick battle royal at WrestleMania 17. And I remember this so clearly, was the Hall of Fame ceremony in 2015. It was in San Jose, and I went to the Hall of Fame and I watched it by myself because Wai was busy having a grappling contest, and therefore I was there by myself. And all I remember clearly was the Bushwhackers came up and they had the most awesome speech. They were just themselves, but it was so entertaining. And that, to me, it was just this great speech that they had. And they were just so fun to hear. So that was sort of their last big public spotlight a number of years ago at the Hall of Fame ceremony. And interestingly enough, a book on their careers had just come out from a John Crowther, who wrote their book Blood, Sweat, and Cheers that had just come out. So if you want to learn more about them, that is out there as well. But he was 78 years old, so very unfortunate. And don't know the specifics about what exactly the illness was, but had just landed in LA for Mania weekend stuff.
Yeah, I had heard about him being hospitalized, as part of just everything going on, all the news maybe coming out of the particular weekend. And this is really, really sad. He is, I think, part of a handful of, for me at least, like these sort of like real life cartoon characters from that sort of like Hulk Hogan late 80s, early 90s era that I still remember very fondly. So I'm sure anybody who was a wrestling fan at the time knows the Bushwhackers and had a real impression of just the gimmick. I believe you and I had a chance to actually record interviews with both Bushwhackers at one point, John, at independent wrestling shows here in Canada. And so they're always around the circuit. And this is really unfortunate, really sad.
Yeah. One figure that I really want to do a lot more digging into, who, Dave Meltzer put out that he had passed away, and that is Max Crabtree, who was an enormous, influential promoter in the UK during, the height of, wrestling on network television and working with joint promotions. He was the brother of Shirley Crabtree, Big Daddy, who was an enormous star in that part of the world. His brother also involved, Brian, but just passing away. So we'll probably have more on him later this week, but did want to mention that as well. Fightful was the first to report that Jagger Reid and Rip Fowler of the Schism had apparently requested their releases from WWE, and the Wrestling Observer followed up that they had been granted their releases. So certainly throwing a curveball into the Schism after their loss and, not securing Chase U on Saturday. And we will see what is next for them. I mean, they were a very good team in a really I just never have latched on to this group. Joe Gacy's a good talker, but this is a group that I don't see it really working. And I don't know what they're, obviously if they want their release, they figure there's better options elsewhere. And they've also been in NXT for a while. And once you're there for so long, it's sort of the writing on the wall of, okay, are we moving forward or are we just stagnant?
Yeah. I mean, I thought they were on a pretty decent trajectory when they came over here just as a grizzled young vets,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't know which one is Jagger Reid and which one is Rip Fowler. I'm looking at these names, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, if
I believe Fowler is on the right and Reid is on the left.
Like, these are the most
They were terrible
names. Jagger Reid and Rip Fowler, like creative, like just name generator types of names. But Fowler is on the right. Whatever. The one guy could really promo incredibly well, and they're an excellent in-ring tag team. So, I mean, I don't know if you hear too often these days, like, people asking for their releases just because they are frustrated and they want to see what's out there in the indies, especially right now when an AEW is already so congested themselves. But good for them for wanting to, thinking that they can achieve more than their role offers.
Then we had SmackDown numbers from Friday, 2,484,000 viewers, up 12% from the week before, and a 0.69 in the demo, which was up 19%. So they were first among network programs and third for the night on television behind the coverage of the Iowa-South Carolina women's basketball game. Largest 18 to 49 audience since Christmas Day of 2020, which is an aberration because that was the show that had the huge NFL lead-in. So a huge number for them in 18 to 49 and their highest audience since the SmackDown going into the Royal Rumble back in January. They also did one of their biggest numbers in years in Canada, 315,700. They had just topped 300,000 a few weeks ago, and this was even higher. So another big number going into WrestleMania weekend. Rampage was back to its normal time slot of Friday at 10 Eastern, and it was not good news. 340,000 viewers down. So what I did was I compared to the last time they were on Friday at 10 p.m. rather than the change in time and change in nights. So from 3 weeks ago, when they aired at Friday at 10, they were down 24% in viewers and down 35% in the demo, a 0.10. It was their lowest audience in their regular night and time ever. 41st among cable originals. And this was a show that it was not just like Hall of Fame and Supercard of Honor that you were going against. There was also that giant women's basketball game that was going on. So it's like even regular programming was significant in terms of cable competition. But I think just your wrestling audience that would be more inclined to be watching a Rampage, even like the AEW consumer had a competitive option in Supercard of Honor, granted a pay-per-view, but nonetheless, this was a show that it came and went on Friday, and I did not sense any attention paid to this show.
And I wonder if it's for a reason like this that might maybe give AEW some pause of advertising a Supercard of Honor too harshly on their shows.
It could be. Like it's certainly Tony Khan made a big deal about that last year for Supercard, that they were okay with them promoting it, knowing that we're running a show that is technically going against our Rampage show that is the one that you are promoting and paying for. So it's, they run these on the Friday night, and it's a tricky night when you've got Rampage as well. But I think there's a lot larger issues with Rampage than just this 1 week. I would hope that it rebounds somewhat, but it's still a show that, it has its issues that we always go over. And before we get to Raw, NXT on Tuesday night, they've only announced 2 matches. Pretty Deadly against Tony D'Angelo and Channing Lorenzo. Odyssey Jones takes on Dijak, and that is all of our fallout from NXT. And no call-ups on Raw.
No, none tonight.
No hints, no vignettes, nothing. Dynamite on Wednesday has 10 million things that they are promoting. MJF Day will take place on Long Island. The Guns put their titles up against the careers of FTR. House of Black defend the trios belts against Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends. Jamie Hayter against Riho for the women's title. Hook against Ethan Page for the FTW title. So we have 4 title matches. Juice Robinson against Ricky Starks. Sammy Guevara against Commander. The BCC will speak. The Acclaimed are going to give their answer to the JAS, and Tony Khan has a very important announcement. That is a lot of graphics on this image.
It's always a lot of people. Yeah, always a game of seeing how many names, how many open mouths versus how many closed mouths. This is not that unusual for Dynamite, but especially this week, maybe coming off of a WrestleMania, maybe AEW wants to grab a bit more of the conversation. So we'll see if they can do that with this particular show.
They're also taping Ring of Honor on Wednesday night and have announced Athena and Miyu Yamashita for the women's title. And they're not doing Rampage because Rampage will be on Friday night, where they're doing Rampage and Battle of the Belts from Kingston, Rhode Island. And it turns out Rampage is airing at 10. Battle of the Belts is airing at 11 on Friday night.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have to have an off-air discussion on what we're doing on Friday night.
I hear nothing about it. I mean, I guess they'll announce the card on Wednesday, and we'll see if it's if there's that much interest. Yeah, we'll have a conversation and let us know, audience. Like, do you guys care about these shows? Or would you rather we skip ahead and just talk about SmackDown and start a bit earlier? Is there interest in hearing us talk about it? We'll see what the matches are at least.
Well, Raw from Monday night at the Crypto.com Arena in LA. It was a sold out show. And as we noted, Fightful earlier in the day, they had reported like the plans for Raw, and the original plans had included 2 women's 3-way matches for sort of like a contenders tournament. And then that ended up getting shifted. And in their place was the women's tag match we got with Raquel and Liv Morgan against Dakota Kai and Io Sky. They had also noted there were updated format sheets and that Vince McMahon was in Gorilla at least for the first segment. But between that, late changes and stuff, like it could be coincidence, but it's certainly fingerprints of a prior regime.
That was going to be maybe the biggest sign of something being amiss is late changes. But it's hard to say definitively, but I definitely think it showed in the quality of this particular show.
Well, Paul Levesque starts the show. He puts over everyone in the back that puts their bodies on the line, the staff, the crew that pull off WrestleMania weekend, Stu, the camera operator, for all that he does. And dude, Hunter loved this WrestleMania set. He just could not get enough of it. And then he thanks the fans. And WWE is dominating the news today. But Paul is here to assure you that they are not going anywhere. And he echoes the opening signature, then, now, together, forever. Wade, WWE isn't going anywhere.
I mean, well, it's true. It's not. I guess
was anyone concerned about that? Was that on the table?
So yeah, like yesterday after the press conference, he said pretty similar as well, unprompted. He closed off the press conference by saying those words, and I just found it incredibly odd that he would couch this sort of news of the sale. I guess is it a sale? Is it a merger? Like they've been trying to present it as a merger, but I mean, why not run with that?
It's one company having, it's a small majority, but it is a majority nonetheless. I think it's just parsing. I understand there is a distinction, but
there's a new boss. They all have a new
That is
boss.
it. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in that sense it is a sale, but like I also don't know why like Levesque would need to maybe assure anybody of any sort of concern, because at least I don't see that concern at all from the audience. There's no concern about people saying, oh no, what is this gonna? I guess the only concern has been the pay-per-view pricing model, and that certainly was not something he was going to address. And I don't think he was attempting to even broach that sort of topic in this particular thing. But I just found it odd of how much he was playing defense. Against what idea that like what WWE was going to change now because of this news.
It was also interesting that I was not surprised, but when they do the WrestleMania stuff and all the headlines and stuff, like I was curious if they were going to present the sale news. Like this is not like bad news for them. Like it
makes them a more powerful company.
Yeah, but the words endeavor were never said, and it was almost
UFC.
like Paul Levesque. Honestly, like if you were like living under a rock today and you did not pay attention, you could have watched this opening segment, and I don't think your takeaway was this company's been sold and one of the biggest news stories ever occurred today.
No,
I don't think you'd have that conclusion. It was not like they were in this big mode of like promoting the fact that this deal has been completed, and maybe there will be a time for that, but it was obviously like that was the real world, and it's the night after WrestleMania. WrestleMania is the full focus of the show.
Yeah, I imagine if you're watching the show, you'd probably be well aware of exactly what he was alluding to. But I mean, I don't think children would know, nor do I necessarily wonder if children would care. And maybe there's some thinking there is like, oh, like we want to maintain the illusion. But I don't know why he would necessarily need to assure anybody that things were going to stay the same, because I certainly wasn't under the impression that anything was about to change. This would be something I'd be promoting. This is like something that, I mean, like Vince said, is the biggest deal that they've ever made. It gives more power to this company on a mainstream level, and it will allow them, the ability to be bigger than it ever has been. So I don't know why he would frame this in a negative light, I thought.
Also, we mentioned earlier today as well that when Vince McMahon sent out an email internally in the company, it did include the line that Paul Levesque is staying on as the chief creative executive. So that line was in there. If there was any doubt, I mean, that line was in there, and they did have a call today with both employees, and there were also like meetings with talent at TV.
Yeah. It's been kind of maybe illuminating to me to see how much the topic of Vince McMahon, whether or not Vince McMahon is going to be a part of creative, how much that's permeated outside of our little bubble. Like in the CNBC on these interviews and these articles I'm reading from a mainstream business world, they're mentioning that, like it's become such a big issue now, and it seems to be the chief concern of at least the audience, that I certainly don't see them publicly ever announcing that Vince has any sort of role, and continuing to assure the audience that Paul Levesque is in charge.
Roman Reigns then is brought out, and he comes out with Heyman and Solo Sikoa. They had a lot of heat, and he says, "Hollywood, acknowledge me." And he is interrupted by Cody Rhodes, who comes out and he is selling his ribs. He's holding on and comes in, and he acknowledges that Reigns was the better competitor last night, wishes that Solo Sikoa didn't have to be a factor and we could just have a one-on-one match because last night I had you. And Cody wants a rematch. Heyman turns him down. Or first he says, "When do you want this rematch?" And Cody says, "Tonight." Heyman declines and says, "Not tonight, not in Puerto Rico, not at SummerSlam, not at Survivor Series, not at Guilty as Charged, nowhere. No rematch for Cody." And then Cody calls out the chicanery of Paul Heyman, that he's not going to stand tonight and he's not in a normal mood tonight. So Cody says, "Let's do something. Let's have a tag match." And after consulting with Heyman, Reigns accepts, but on the provision that if someone is stupid enough to team with you tonight in this tag match, they can never challenge Roman Reigns as long as he is champion. And with that, Brock Lesnar's music plays, and Corey Graves reminds us that Brock Lesnar, after losing to Reigns at SummerSlam last July, can never challenge Roman again. So therefore, the stipulation does not apply to Brock Lesnar as long as Roman is champion and is going to team with Cody.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a bit of a weird. I understand why they did it, of course, just to kind of like have a one-up on the Bloodline and Paul Heyman. But like in story and kayfabe, isn't that a bit of a weird request from the Bloodline? Like, why wouldn't Heyman put that restriction on Cody and instead put that restriction on the opponent that was to walk out?
There was a lot of this that I just found it was just like the logic of it all. Number one is I don't think they ever repeated this stipulation when Brock was going into the Royal Rumble this year. Like, don't you think that should have been that's
a great point. Yeah.
It's like, yes, Roman could have lost the title before WrestleMania, but right. This scenario, I mean, that obviously does not sell the match.
Well, he could challenge for the NXT championship. Okay. He like Charlotte did. He could challenge for the IC.
All viable options. Yeah. Had Brock won. On top of it, okay, we can like mix in the angle at the end of all this. If you are Brock Lesnar and we assume you want to get to the title, would it not play to your strategy to befriend Cody and get him towards this rematch, and then you turn on him when he wins this title? Like, you have no chance back to this title. Like, what's
well, he's gonna need a hell of an explanation next week, I think, for why he turned on him.
Well, there were definitely questions left after this. So
I did appreciate, at least for a few hours, we had best friend Cody and Brock Lesnar. Look how much these two were playing it up. Like, I don't know if they've ever had any sort of on-screen interaction.
I wish they did at least like one backstage segment instead of just segment one and the final segment of the night. Like, just something that it's like, it's Goofy Brock, and it's the last time we're going to have Goofy Brock for a long time, and just kind of cements that, okay, these two are like buds now. And it would have made the turn to me a little bit more, just have some more like, we're doing a 2-hour turn here or 3-hour turn. So give me a little something.
Well, we don't know how many dates Brock has. Maybe he's not going to show up for a bit.
Omos and Elias. Elias died in 1:42 with a tree.
So again, so this was an hour commercial free hour.
First hour was commercial free.
They have the NCAA men's basketball final between UConn and San Diego that was taking place at 9:00. So I guess this was the unopposed hour that they wanted to load up.
Yeah, and that means they would have been shooting the big angle with Bad Bunny pretty much Was that right at the top of the hour? I think it was like right around the crossover was the big Bad Bunny angle.
Okay.
So, anyway,
well, the game tip off I looked up probably wasn't until like 9:20, so they might have
okay.
still
So
attracted
that
a
was
few
smart
people.
to do that angle before the big surge for the basketball game.
Hmm.
Omos and Elias, it was just real quick, minute 42, no angle with Omos, just gets a win after the loss to Brock Lesnar.
Oh my god, like this show, dude. Like, yes, it was an hour commercial free, and you had some significant angles, as we will talk about.
There were
but
two
it's
big angles on the show.
two big angles, and one of them was certainly not Triple H coming out and delivering his announcement. The dude said nothing, barely addressed whatever, like he thanked everybody, which was a nice gesture, but hardly something that deserved my attention for whatever the billing was. And then the rest of this show was dog shit. There was nothing going on. I mean, no, like it just felt like it was I don't know if it was a limited roster or what, like maybe one good match. Beyond that, just
It's
very
the
like
show you
minimal
built
effort.
up to be the show that you're going to get surprises. You're going to get like the return was Riddle, which didn't light anyone's
Or just
world
at
on
the
fire.
very least, like the beginning of a new story or something, or like some sort of interesting direction. This was about as bare bones of a Raw as we've seen in a long, long
Very
time.
bare bones. Very bare bones. The Usos knocked on Roman's door. This part was interesting, and Heyman answers and explains that Roman's has left for a moment to talk to Solo, and he has instructed the Usos to go wait on the jet and enjoy the seafood. And as the Usos leave, Paul turns around and says, "I took care of it, Tribal Chief," meaning that Roman was inside the locker room and just doesn't want to be around the Usos. So there's a seed planted there now that the Usos have lost the tag titles, and what is their relationship with the bloodline now that they have no perceived value to Roman.
I like it. I mean, it continues this, potential babyface turn of the Usos that they've already been setting in motion. So I like the way that Heyman was able to reveal at the end that Roman was still in the room. I thought it was well done.
Kathy Kelly interviewed Bad Bunny at ringside, accompanied by Pat LaPrade, and he explained that he is going to be hosting Backlash, and he's excited to bring WWE back to Puerto Rico. Ray comes out, greets Bad Bunny, and then he's talking about his Hall of Fame induction when Austin Theory interrupts, insults Ray's parenting skills, insults the crowd, and mocks the audience that Cena warned me about you fans, that I can't be touched. And the chant for Cena says Cena's not here. He's a part-timer. And it leads to Ray threatening to kick his teeth out, and they have a match. Not the night after WrestleMania segment for Austin Theory that I think people are going to be looking back on and thinking, wow, this was a turning point.
Yeah, really. I was looking to the night after WrestleMania almost as important as the match with John Cena itself, because this, you could say what you want about the match. There have been a lot of criticisms, and I think justified. But more important was the ability for him to be able to talk about beating John Cena, to really absorb all the value of actually being in the record book, somebody who's beaten John Cena, by just gloating about it and making it feel like the biggest win of his entire life. He was just a bit of a supporting role here, in this Ray Dominic program. And that to me was a little bit disappointing, not to say we can't get that in the future. And obviously coming out of this, he got another sort of notch in his belt for this legend killer gimmick he's building up. And maybe we'll get the promo next week, because I guess after beating Ray, he can, continue to claim that he's beating all these legends.
Well, I'll say this. I thought this was a much better match than the WrestleMania match that he had with Ray. He did. And it's worth noting, like, Theory has been on the road every weekend working Seth Rollins on these house shows. So after months of that, like, you would hope like this guy is making advancements, working night after night, or at least weekend after weekend with Rollins on these shows. So some of the highlights, Theory delivered this giant spin off his shoulders. The crowd is chanting, "You tapped out." The 619 gets cut off by this big clothesline, and then Theory rolls and gets caught by Ray, sent into the ropes. And as Ray is setting up for the 619, Dominic comes to the apron. Ray is temporarily distracted, and when he goes for the 619, he is caught by Theory, and it's turned into the A-Town Down in 9:24. But this was not a segment about Austin Theory, though he did get the win. And Dominic, attacks Rey alongside Damian Priest. They're booing Dominic, and Dominic spots Bad Bunny, walks up to him, and then Dominic goes to hit him. Bad Bunny blocks the punch, and he punches Dom as Priest then yanks Bad Bunny over the barricade. They're arguing. Of course, we have the history between Bad Bunny and Damian Priest, and he tries to calm him down, but then Bunny nails Dominic again. So now Priest attacks Bad Bunny and hits him with the South of Heaven, choke slamming him through the desk. And Corey Graves, that's an artist, man. And Corey Graves was like giving this like the concern that, oh my God, maybe the WWE is going to go away because we are going to get sued into oblivion by this man. And at the end of this, Corey was pretty great on the show, I thought.
I loved him screaming about hey, Priest, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
He's yelling at Priest. And then Corey Graves apologizes. I'm so sorry to all of Bad Bunny's fans on behalf of WWE. It's like thinking they're going to get death threats for destroying this man in this angle. But Rey is out to check on him, and it looks to be our setup for the Backlash match, and looking probably like a tag match.
Yeah. I mean, despite what Triple H said, this absolutely looks like, I mean, the dude took a chokeslam on a table tonight, so I'm pretty sure he will be physically involved and build part of this particular matchup. I thought this turned out great. This was my favorite thing on this entire show. What a lovely way to parlay this Rey Dom story into this mega, what I would presume to be the main event of this Puerto Rico show, with now added mainstream appeal with the attachment of a Bad Bunny wrestling. You can't have a hotter story in order to focus on a Latino market than this Rey and Dominic program right now, and adding Bad Bunny on top of it. All the pieces are in perfect place for this huge match. And along the way, I think you're going to be raising a lot of people up with you. And that, of course, now includes Damian Priest, who did not have a WrestleMania match, but this will more than make up for it, in my opinion. He's going to be portrayed as like the big threat heading into this match. And playing up the history he has with Bad Bunny, I think really makes for a pretty interesting dynamic. And the LWO, of course, I'm sure will be playing a big supporting act along the way as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the hope is that this will get a lot of attention in the next day or so of doing this angle on television. And this is the kind of thing that I think is, WWE, they have aggressively tapped into a lot of celebrities. And I think that this is going to be a big project for them, continuing much beyond. But this is everything aligning for a big show in Puerto Rico. And
I think it kind of shows that you could have the babyface win the big match, and the heel can regain his heat the very next show. No problem.
That's it. Just put a guy through a desk, and we're all even. Pierce is upset with Damian Priest, and Priest defends it, saying, "How about that same energy for Bad Bunny getting involved on Saturday? You weren't upset about that, and if I didn't like Bad Bunny, it would have ended up even worse." Owens and Zayn come out, and they are basking in the glow of their win on Saturday. The audience is singing Olay. Sammy says he wouldn't have done this without the fans, and they want to have a fight tonight. So the Street Profits come out, and they issue the challenge to Owens and Zayn, which, I mean, Owens and Zayn had like opened it up to anyone. Like, I don't think we had to go through this whole debate. And then we go to commercial. Will it be made official? I was at the edge of my seat. Would it be made official? I'm waiting for one time they come back and say, you know what, folks? Didn't get approval. We're moving on. Owens and Zayn against the Street Profits for the undisputed tag titles. So I guess this is their four-way win. This is their title shot.
Yeah, it looked like it. I thought that they would actually delay this a little bit, maybe build up the Street Profits a little bit more, but they decided to just cash in tonight.
There was a sunset bomb by Sami Zayn onto Ford. They lifted up Zayn on Dawkins' shoulders, and Ford hits what Craves calls the biggest blockbuster Hollywood has seen in months, which was a good line. Owens comes in, cannonball, swanton. Dawkins makes the save, and then Ford hits a tope con hero, landing on his feet. It looked incredible. The from the heavens misses, and then he's caught with the stunner, and Sami just pushes Ford into the corner, and now he does this delayed death stare before hitting the haluva kick. And man, this haluva kick, it just looks awesome. 12:55, your champions retain, and the Street Profits All right. They had a great match at WrestleMania. They can hang their hat on that.
I thought the showcase match was really good, and for me, it really reinvigorated like my interest in the tag division, knowing how good tag team wrestling can be in the WWE, especially the main event. I thought this was a good match, but I was more so disappointed in just me asking whether or not this felt important and whether or not they're dedicated to actually creating interesting storylines for their tag teams. And yeah, this is just supposed to be maybe a big statement showcase match for your new champions. I was disappointed that they chose the Street Profits for it because I thought there was going to be a bit more value put into the Street Profits before they got to this, tag team challenge, a bit more value put into a story and a real rivalry that they could build between these two teams before actually getting there. Instead, it seemed like it was just kind of played for this one night thing. And then what do you do with the Street Profits? Where do they go back? It just seems like they're back in the middle and the entire division suffers. I mean, maybe who's next for what is it? Owens and Zayn. That could feel like it could be a main event.
Beyond a rematch with the Usos, I don't know if you have that team. Like, you have not built up a whole lot of supporting teams. Like, you can pick a Braun and a Ricochet.
I think Sheamus and Drew will probably reunite.
Yeah, that's down the road though. I don't think you can just do that immediately.
Right. Yeah.
Kelly interviewed Seth Rollins in the back, and he summons his theme to play. So he comes out, and we come back from break, and he's just soaking in the fans singing his song in the middle of the ring, and he leaves, and that was it. They just sang.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Seth Rollins promos, but I would have probably preferred he actually have something to say. I know the song is really, all there is, but there is just unless you're there live and unless you really love the song, I guess there's no point for me watching at home for this entire thing. So it just felt like they had no material.
Way, you're being unfair. Let me continue.
Let this play out. Okay.
Exactly. Because next we had a huge angle. Kathy Kelly was with Bobby Lashley, who was coming off a memorable weekend, and he's frustrated about not wrestling at WrestleMania. So Bronson Reed walks up to him and calls him uncle because you've taught me things and I could be your pupil. You taught me how to lose in the Andre Battle Royal, and eventually the pupil can school the teacher. So Lashley challenges him to a match. Reed says, I can't do it tonight, but eventually you will learn your lesson. What was this?
This was a terrible promo, is what it was.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to get more of this. They're holding this off. This is the big match to come down the road. Instead, Mustafa Ali comes in and he says that Lashley just needs to think more positive, Ali. And Lashley just gets sick of it. He throws this guy into the ring. They have an impromptu match that goes 39 seconds, and he submits Ali with the hurt lock. I'm wondering if Ali was texting with the Schism saying, hey, guys.
How did you do it? Yeah. All of this was terrible. We had wondered, well, what follow-up do they have? Like they gave Bobby Lashley the Andre win. He must be setting something up for WrestleMania night. They set him up for a walkout with the trophy. And then we said, well, okay, if not, then probably Monday, right? They must have a big direction for Bobby Lashley. Man, it's Bronson Reed, dude. And then it's like, not to say there's anything wrong with it, but this interaction in the back just made this thing feel so.
Look at how they handled Bronson Reed in the Elimination Chamber. Mm-hmm. And what did they do in those 6 weeks since?
Very little. What is it, like Elias or something? Yeah, like this just feels like such a mid-card program.
Reigns and Heyman are with Sikoa, and Reigns asks if his cousins are gone. Heyman says they're in the jet, and Reigns asks, did you know that Brock would be here? And Heyman says, the night after WrestleMania? This is usually when Brock leaves everyone hanging for 6 to 9 months. He just asks, how did this happen? And Heyman says Lesnar has nothing to lose. So Reigns explains he's going to tag in Solo tonight to prove to Cody who is ready. Bianca comes out and she thanks Asuka, and she was really trying to get the crowd going here. They were not going crazy here, and she was trying to amp them up. And she is interrupted by Rhea Ripley, who calls Bianca Belair the luckiest woman in WWE because I chose Charlotte over you, but promises Bianca that they will get back to this. And the whole crowd, they start chanting mommy. And Belair says, "You didn't choose me for a reason. And when you're ready, then we'll see who is the best of the best." So Rhea just stands down and leaves, and then Liv and Raquel walk out, and Raquel gives a stare to Rhea and keeps walking. So this match is going to happen. It just seems that it's not going to happen for a while.
Oh, this is their long-term program, and they've already kind of teased, interactions with each other. I mean, you could drag this out probably as long as till the next year's SummerSlam. But
the problem is what they will be doing with these two in between that time.
That is going to be part of the problem. But listen, Rhea and Charlotte did not have a great build, and we're all coming out of the weekend talking about it. So I'm sure the in-ring will be great, and ultimately that is the most important thing. I like this segment. It was like a nice callback to what they did 2 years ago back in NXT, when these two NXT alumni went back to NXT with their belts, celebrating with Raquel. So this, having Raquel being a part of tonight's iteration, I thought was an interesting little callback to it. I think it also seems to tease Rhea versus Raquel as maybe Raquel's upcoming program, Rhea's upcoming program over on SmackDown. So, yeah.
And how much Rhea is on Raw and SmackDown. Like, I could see her just floating back and forth for the sake of the Judgment Day. Liv and Raquel against Dakota Kai and Io Sky. So the winners will get a tag title shot next week. It saw Raquel powerbomb Liv to the floor, the spot that they have been doing together. Raquel then tries to lift up Kai for the Tejana bomb, but Sky holds her from the apron to prevent it. But then Sky is knocked down. Tejana bomb is hit, followed by Oblivion in 7:04. Liv and Raquel will take on Becky and Lita next week in Seattle.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just like a pretty nothing standard, like.
Well, someone said we cannot have this one-night tournament. We need this tag match. We need this on the show.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Does it's a tag match, like with no real grudge, no promos, no just nothing, no interaction, and you don't always need it. You could just promote Dream Match, and really sometimes that's all you need. But I think you need a little bit more.
The Miz comes out and he mentions he is done with surprises after having more matches than anyone at WrestleMania, with Pat McAfee, George Kittle, jumping Shane McMahon, who he beat so badly he couldn't finish the match, and Snoop Dogg sucker punched him and gave me the worst people's elbow. Tonight, it's a new season, no more surprises. Matt Riddle returns, and Corey Graves says, "We haven't seen Riddle in months, nearly a year. The man has been out since December." So
maybe
Miz,
he hasn't seen him.
Well, Miz attacks Riddle, and then Riddle fights back and hits him with the Bro Derek, and we're going to get this match next week.
Yeah. The one big surprise on this show, I don't know if it was. Yeah, I don't know if it was that big of a surprise. Is there interest in a Matt Riddle? Like, I feel like the interest in him has really cooled off.
I think it's I think he's starting at, it's not like this was some crazy return pop. It was, I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was also him coming back, the same character. It was, I don't know. I think he's working to, build himself back up. I think he's starting at like a lower point.
I think at this point, the Miz is going to turn babyface with how much he's just, being used to set these people up. He's like taking beatings 3 days in a row.
I'll tell you, this will certainly be a bit of a litmus test on the creative front, is if Riddle goes for revenge against Solo Sikoa, who took him out.
Right. Okay.
Then Graves notes that Bad Bunny has been taken to a local medical facility and he might have a separated shoulder, which is an injury that I'm sure he can come back to in time for the first weekend of May.
You're going to hold a microphone.
That could be tough. Yeah. Might need to have a headset. Saxton interviews Becky, Lita, and Trish, and Becky says they're going to raise the prestige of the tag title starting next week. And you're led to believe like Trish is just going to like hang out with them and come to the match next week. And I guess we're just on angle alert until they're ready to do something, because Trish is just like the third wheel.
Yeah. I'm sure they kind of want you to feel that way, and I think it's fine, like pacing this just a little bit. There's no urgency right now in trying to build to a Mania moment or anything like that. And they're giving them airtime. Let's see.
Yeah, technically they got a minute here on television. So they did get airtime. So those are the two matches for next week. And then it is what they had promoted all night long is the biggest tag match in Raw history. Brock's first tag match, actually since his New Japan run. He did have a tag match in New Japan. So we're talking about like 18 years. So Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa against Cody Rhodes. And we're doing the in-ring introductions of the men when all of a sudden Brock destroys Cody Rhodes and hits him with a pair of F5s. And he's just prodding over top of Cody. And given the segment that this was in, it was 10:52 when he attacked Cody. And I instantly knew no one's coming to save Cody. And we are going to get Brock beating on this man for 8 minutes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There was a big gap of where were Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who had this guy's back 24 hours ago.
They need to explain that. Sure. Yeah.
Like they could have easily just had the segment where they're celebrating their win and they take off in their car. And that's a 30-second backstage taping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you just did the save last night. I thought that was glaring for one of these when you had just done it the night before. But nonetheless, if you are listening carefully, Corey Graves completely called this segment. Like there was so little reaction from Kevin Patrick. It was all Corey Graves. He was the one that I have no doubt had like whatever voice in his ear and was directing. And it was him just pretty much calling all of this as Kevin Patrick just like rode shotgun, which is just interesting. Like being like, it's the color guy that's like handling your big angle. But he just drives the steps into Cody, hits the timekeeper's bell. He took a chair at one point and he launched this thing, and it was bringing you back to that door being thrown. He just threw this thing into orbit. Pierce is out, the officials are out, and does further damage to the ribs of Cody as he F5s him onto the steps, stands over top of him in the ring, and then goes to leave, but then comes back with a chair with more chair shots. They're searching for any concerned looks in the crowd that they can cut to. And then at the end, Lesnar just stands on top of the stage and gives the middle fingers as the show ends. And we have, this was the other big angle of the night, getting to a Cody Brock Lesnar match at some point down the road. And your detour for Cody Rhodes to get him away for Roman Reigns as he is denied a rematch. And they've got to keep those two away as far as they need to. And Brock is a good distraction. Like they can delay this match too. Like, I don't know if Brock's doing Puerto Rico, but that would probably be the earliest you could do this, if not stretching it longer to Saudi Arabia. Did
you get assurance tonight from watching that they were going to go back to Roman versus Cody after a long period?
I think that they will eventually get there, but it was certainly like they have created the obstacle for him.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty assured just by the way, Cody introduced the rematch idea. And I thought Cody sounded pretty good in just being pissed off and being fired up and wanting revenge. So I think for that reason, I can see that they might be building back up to a rematch, but you never know. You never know. This could have already been the end of this story, the end of this, rivalry between Cody and Roman. And with this detour to Brock Lesnar, it just kind of gives them an out to cut this off, which would be disappointing. But as
no, like, I mean, that is the Money in the Bank is that tool that they can easily explain, like that bypasses anything. Like that's it's not like this was some agreed upon stipulation. It is Roman is denying him a rematch, but if you get your opportunity with Money in the Bank, that sets up the rematch for Cody, and that could set up SummerSlam, that could set up where you go. So they have the obstacle there. Your goal is going to be to recreate what you had built up for the last 3 months, and we will see if they can do it or not. It was they had built it up pretty damn big for Sunday night. So now the goal is, or the job is to start over, and hopefully you have something equal, if not bigger, for the second one.
Well, as a follow-up program for Cody Rhodes that is just lost to Roman Reigns, I think Brock Lesnar is pretty damn great. You have one of the hottest baby faces you've had in a long time against one of your most effective heels on a main event level.
And
in a
will
Brock
require
Lesnar.
Brock to do a real match as opposed to your 5 minutes that he's been doing for a while.
Well, it'll require Cody to take a lot of suplexes.
Well,
That's
yeah,
probably what
this
it'll
is a
take.
match where Cody has to get killed for it. And I believe Cody's template is going to be that John Cena match with Brock. The first one that they did when Brock came back in 2012, not the, maybe Cody will take inspiration from the SummerSlam suplex match as well.
I think Cody will excel like in that type of Brock Lesnar match. You know, I'm looking forward to it. It's good to have like a serious, a heel Brock Lesnar return. This would have been even better if it was for a championship, but hey, like the match I'm sure will be really good.
I can see Brock winning this first match too.
Oh yeah, me too.
Whether you're going to get a multiple match series or it's just Cody loses and then gets into Money in the Bank, like I see Brock winning this match.
Yeah, maybe Brock needs it right now.
That was Raw. Again, it was two big angles. I would say, like, if you were tuning in and this is like the big, I don't know, the night after Raw, I think it's been kind of a thing that they had built up, and it was a thing years ago, and it's been a long time since it has been. But even like just getting like a fresh coat of paint with a tease of a call up or, they set up two big matches. So you can't say this was a nothing show. They did have that. It was a lively crowd, but not a crazy crowd by prior year standards either. And there was a ton of non-important events on these 3 hours, and when you have a commercial-free hour, it adds up. When you have two big angles.
Yeah, this commercial-free stuff. I understand why they do it. I'm sure it pays off for them when it comes to the ratings. But to actually try to sit through it, if you're one of the people that decides to watch the rest of the show after the commercial-free, you're paying for so much of it. Like you're getting short segments. You're not necessarily getting anything of substance, and you're sitting through a lot of commercial breaks. So if you're gonna watch this, well, what do you even have to watch on this show? The Ray Dominic angle I thought was really well done with Bad Bunny. If you care to see the Triple H address, then go ahead and watch that. Brock Lesnar angle at the end. Sammy and Kevin versus the Street Profits was a good match, maybe the only good match on the show, and that was kind of it.
I would say that was the only good match on the show. Ray and Austin Theory was like passable. Again, I enjoyed that more than the Cena match, but that's not a high. But it was a fine match for the time they had. We didn't go over it earlier, but I did want to make mention of our schedule for this week. So Alex Sherman will be on Tuesday at noon Eastern. Tuesday night, Braden and Davey will be live after the NXT following Stand and Deliver. Maybe it will be a more wild show than people got on Monday for Raw. But then on Wednesday, Wai and I are back with Rewind to Dynamite after the show from Long Island, New York. And then later on this week, it is a special Thursday edition of Rewind Away. We're putting it out Thursday this week for postwrestlingcafe.com members. And this week, what are we discussing?
We'll be talking about CM Punk on The Art of Wrestling with Cole Cabana. This obviously is probably the most talked about professional wrestling podcast that has ever existed. This was the thing that put these two into court with certain people that were mentioned on this podcast and was the ultimate reason for the falling out between the two. So it's not often we go back and look at a podcast, but this one was chosen by an executive producer and we thought was important enough to really dive into. So looking forward to that.
Yes. And for Cafe members, especially new ones that have just jumped on board, you will get that show on Thursday, then Rewind to SmackDown on Friday. Saturday, Bruce Lord and Karen Peterson are doing a review of New Japan Sakura Genesis card, which is a very strong show on paper. I will not be doing that show because there's a UFC pay-per-view Saturday night as the synergy continues. And Sunday, we will have a UFC 287 post show with myself and Eric Marcotte. And then the week caps off with WrestleNomics Radio, where, this is the story of all stories for WrestleNomics listeners. So a great week to follow up WrestleMania week. And again, thank you to all of you that checked out our WrestleMania coverage. The site did really well last week, and especially people that signed up at postwrestlingcafe.com. $6 gets you in the door with multiple bonus shows per week, 3 coming at you this coming week. And of course, you can also subscribe at video.postwrestling.com. That gives you video access to all of our bonus shows that we do, and a great way to support our beautiful images.
Our faces. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, who wouldn't want this? But yeah, thank you guys all for joining there, and let's get to some feedback.
we start off with Cody from Maine, who writes in a big thanks to John and Brandon for the
Let's start off here actually with some super chats because we actually have
Oh.
a few of them, John. So sorry about that. Let's go to Richard, who sends £5 to say, if you guys had to make a prediction right now, if Dwayne doesn't want in, what is the main event for WrestleMania 40? Thank you, Richard, for the support.
A year from now, I would hope it's a main event that we can't foresee right now, because that would indicate that there are going to be new stars a year from now, that you will have fresh stories, and that it may be like, I do not think, if the question is a roundabout way of asking if it's going to be Cody and Roman a year from now, I think that's way too long to wait.
They've done it before.
Who has?
Cena, Rock.
Yeah, they did do it that 1 year. But they didn't do that. They didn't give a year announcement for a rematch.
But they gave it a year announcement for the first one.
They did, yeah, and you could argue that was a pretty long year, because it kind of put a lot of stuff on hold, where you knew where Cena was going to be a year from then.
Right. It's a completely different era right now of promotion. For these PLEs, they don't have the same pressure of peaking for every single one. They're trying to do a whole lot with the secondary championships to elevate those. But I mean, you can also tell the Cody story all the way up for him to chase to get back there. And I certainly feel like he's probably the main candidate right now when we're talking about what the big match is, a year from now. It's the Gato philosophy of booking. You delay the big moment 1 year so that you can peak, you can have a story to tell for the entire next year. So he's certainly, I would say, the only candidate that I feel like would be worthy right now. Are there any others that you could see rise up to this level in a year's time?
Rollins could be back in the mix again, but if you're looking, Rollins is in this weird spot where I don't think people look at him as like a fresh main eventer, because he's had his runs, but at the same time, I don't feel like he's had that really defined run as the guy. Even the first one, when he held the title and then had the injury, and you could certainly look at him as one of your best performers, if not your best performer that you might look at. I don't throw out the notion that like Logan Paul is going to have some serious like matches over this next year, and that there's always going to be that one or two people that we're not thinking about now that's going to have a breakthrough, that you hope will have a breakthrough.
I would hope by next year we'll be talking about Gunther in a world title contention status. I mean, obviously, if Roman is still the heel champion, that doesn't leave much room for Gunther. But if Roman was, for whatever reason, out of the picture, I would look to see a Gunther elevation. Big enough for WrestleMania is a big question, but I would hope that he would be at that level. More importantly, I hope there's like a hot women's program that we'll be talking about heading into WrestleMania that feels like it's a justified main event, So thank you, Richard, for that. Let's go to Anirudh, who sends 220. I don't know what this is, but it's thank you for the support. It sounds like a lovely number. Thank you for 220 of those. Cody was booked awfully, in my opinion. I believed in him as he was larger than life and kicked ass. That was also not the fiery promo he needed. He's going to jump to Brock and become a generic underdog.
I don't think Cody's going to become generic. I don't think that's it. But I won't go as hard as him here. But I totally like. It's very rare that you can get a performer that just catches fire like that. And that is why people always talk about like your timing. Like you don't want to take something like that for granted. And it's always a risk. Like there are performers that you can delay it. And you know what? The end justifies the means. And we could look back a year from now and say, you know what? We thought that WrestleMania was this big peak, but look at the end result. They ended up getting to the destination and Cody was hotter than ever. You can't take that off the table. But I feel that winning that title last night was as much of a sure thing of a fresh shot in the arm, that business is hot as it is. And I do feel like coming out of this weekend, it would have felt as though everything is pushing this company in the direction that this is a hot period. You've got this sale that just is lifting up the profile that much more. It's a new direction. And I think you would have been guaranteeing that you were not going to be having a typical like lull post WrestleMania, but they're they're in fine shape anyway. So that is sort of the caveat there. But if you're looking at just strictly booking, I think last night it was just you had done all the legwork. You were at the goal line and it was just running across and spiking the ball. And they opted to instead decided to, you know what, let's run it back.
What do you think of maybe the suggestion I've seen from some people that might say because they're in the middle of this big sort of a corporate transitional period that they wanted the belt on somebody that they know is a tried and true, I guess, leader of their brand?
I don't put any stock into that. I don't think that would have swayed them one way or another of who their champion is. I think they're looking at this is a company that just had this giant event. Like if I'm just looking at optics, this is it's these guys know what they're doing, and I don't think they're looking at any kind of level at that kind of granular level.
Thank you so much, Anirudh, for the rupees, I've been told. So thank you very much for that. Yes.
Okay.
Let's go up next to Scott Bagley, who sends 550. Thank you for the support, Scott. He says, after Reigns winning at Mania and now Brock versus Cody going forward, do you see them going back to Cody versus Roman later this year? So we did talk about that, but how about before WrestleMania?
I see it really being tough to imagine them holding this off a year. I think it would be tough.
I guess I just don't know why they wouldn't pull the trigger last night if they weren't going to delay it for a whole
I'm not
year.
saying that they won't try that. I just don't know if they're going to have success in doing that. I think you really run the risk, and again, maybe it's a different audience makeup, but like there was a period, and it was during that Cena Rock feud where, listen, that thing drew very well for that rematch, but when they set that up, it was a lot of just groans and, oh, we're getting this again. I would not want to have Cody in this role where it feels as though everything is revolved around him and you're turning this attitude around on Cody, where instead of it being, it's like he's on our timetable, we're going to put it on him then. And your audience starts to take that as though this guy is now being pushed down our throat.
So they're not announcing, and I don't think they would announce, Cody versus Roman a year ahead. They really can't. But you put Cody on the back burner, have him have these feuds with Brock, and then by Rumble, peak him again.
Well, that's what I'm looking at, is that if he is coming out of the Rumble again, like, are you going to recreate this past year where it felt like here's the new guy versus they're going back to this again, and it's not something fresh. It's Reigns and Cody again. There's this booking Roman in this way. You're building all this heat for him. At the same time, you also are training your audience to lack faith in the babyface, that they don't want to be fooled again. And I think you run that risk as well with some of these challenges. And I think they're going to have a hell of a time booking Roman this year in interesting matches when Cody's off the table for a year. Who are those people that keep Roman busy, even if it's 6 pay-per-views this year?
No, I totally agree. That was
the SummerSlam opponent.
That was, I think, my biggest argument for putting the belt on Cody, because it completely freshens up your title picture. You get fresh matchups with everybody. So, and Roman has beaten every single person. So where do you go from here? It looks like they're building potentially to something with the Usos, and I think a lot of people might be clamoring for main event Jey Uso to finally get his rematch against Roman Reigns. That's a possibility that might be able to take them pretty far. But that's only. Maybe that's probably good enough for a few months, but man, what about the rest of the year?
Let's continue on. Do we have any more?
No, that's it for Super Chats. Thank you guys so much for all your support and all your kind words about the coverage this week.
Thank you, everyone. Cody writes, in regards to Raw, I didn't watch the show, but I did see the turn at the end on Twitter or whatever platform is called now. Okay. I can't help but think Brock turning would have been that much more effective if Cody was champion, given the prior stipulation of Brock not being able to challenge Roman for the titles. So, yeah, bringing up what we discussed earlier, that, you do need kind of an explanation for Brock. Graves started to introduce the fact that Brock had to open up the show and Cody closed the show on
and he's mad at Cody for that?
Yeah, Cody is. I thought maybe you should go after Hunter then.
Well, that's not happening. So, all right, let's go to Muggin, who says Raw After Mania has jumped the shark started off fine with Cody and Brock potentially teaming up to face Reigns and Sikoa, only to pull the rug out by the end. I've heard that there were rewrites and it led to an uneven Fallout episode that didn't capitalize a great WrestleMania weekend. Do I need to break out a tinfoil hat and a magnifying glass to find the old man's fingerprints? That's the big speculation coming out of this one. Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go. That's the feedback for tonight's Raw after WrestleMania. So thank you to everybody for tuning in and checking out all of our WrestleMania coverage. We are going to be back on Wednesday night. Wai is going to sleep for 24 hours straight. Actually, that's not true. I don't know how much sleep you get to begin with, Wai.
I get enough. I'm again, like I have a very understanding partner who is very good at dealing with the toddler by herself. So I'm very lucky in that sense. But you won't be sleeping much, John, because you'll be back tomorrow with Brandon Thurston.
That is right. Noon Eastern, youtube.com/postwrestling, media reporter with CNBC, Alex Sherman, joining Brandon and I to talk about breaking the news of a WWE sale to Endeavor. We'll be talking about more fallout of the news and sort of a lot more of kind of the business breakdown and his own thoughts on kind of what this means for Endeavor, what this means for WWE, and what this means for UFC. We haven't talked a whole lot about what this means for UFC, but that's an area to explore as well in the wake of all of this. So that is going to wrap
like just speaking
up.
as a fan, like this is a huge get, and for me speaking, like just even if I wasn't attached to you guys in any way, like I think you guys are at the forefront of all of this. Like obviously you and Brandon coming from a wrestling perspective, but also Alex Sherman, coming at it from the business world, the one to break the story. I can't imagine a better panel to discuss this, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I think Alex is joining us on his vacation. So he's kindly taking some time out. He really picked his week. Yes. Yeah. So that's coming up again, Tuesday, noon Eastern. Subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it very much. And then you will never miss a show. We are live here on the channel every Monday and Wednesday night after Raw and Dynamite. And that concludes